Happy New Year, and I hope 2023 wasn't as chaotic for you, but let's look at the new year with a good topic, which is Cleopatra and the messed up things she's done. Hi, my name is Jessa, and we're going to look at the top 10 brutal acts Queen Cleopatra got away with. Number 10. Slavery. Cleopatra, the last active ruler of the Ptolemaic Kingdom of Egypt, is not particularly associated with the direct role in the institution of slavery during her reign. However, the benefits she had gained during the socio-economic conditions of ancient Egypt were pushed when the financial strain began into weighing in her later years. By Cleopatra's time, Egypt had become a Roman client state, and Cleopatra herself was involved in political alliances and relationship with prominent Romans, including Julius Caesar and Mark Antony. The Roman world was heavily dependent on slave labor, and the economy of Rome and its territories were supported by a significant slave population. The wealth and prosperity of Cleopatra's Egypt were, in some extent, sustained by the labor of both free and enslaved individuals. When she exhausted her financials for civil war, which we will later break down in this video, it was also exhausting the people around her, including those in the lower positions. Her popularity dwindled in all social classes, and her status had become more damaged when it was clear she was not suited for military tactics. Number 9. Bad rep. Although in Egypt at the height of her reign she was seen as an ethereal being with charisma scaled to 100, she had also been seen as untrustworthy to the Romans, and any foreign queen who somehow sprinkled their way into your top military general and rulers would probably be worrisome to the people of Rome. Considering Rome was one of the most abundant and vibrant civilizations that ruled with an iron fist as it colonized its way through Eurasia and Africa, when it came to foreign leaders it was always in extreme dissonance to their influence. Even when Germanic tribes had peaceful moments with the Romans, they were able to trade in good and culture, but either way, the Romans held them at an arm's length. But with Cleopatra, she was straight within the better morning, noon, and night. Cleopatra's relationship with Caesar and Antony were sources of criticism and oppositions from political rivals, especially those who supported the senatorial faction in Rome. The idea of a foreign queen exercising the influence over Roman leaders was politically sensitive, and Cleopatra was often depicted negatively in the propaganda of her enemies. The Roman people did not know what to make of her. They were horrified at the idea of having an Egyptian queen, but they were fascinated by her themselves. As soon as everything unfolded in regards to Julius Caesar and Mark Antony, Augustus was able to regain and exploit the association and knock the rulers back to Rome's hand. In summary, they felt either way, despite her conflicting popularity, she would have not lasted in Rome. Number 8. A broke kingdom in quotations. Her connection with Rome did bring forth a lot of influence to her politically as a ruler in Egypt, as she was able to rain more power and economy to Egypt. She built up Egypt's economy and even expanded Egypt's trade routes to eastern nations. This allowed them to not be dependent solely on Rome, and Cleopatra's work did give Egypt its economic stability. After all, her net worth as a woman in history was estimated to be $95 billion. She was banking, but how did this woman who had so much money still be militarily poor? Well, her spendings. She was able to spend $500,000 alone, which back then was around 10 million sesterces or sesterces, I don't know how they say it, on just dinner, just to show off to Mark Antony how much she had. Number 7. Father's death. Cleopatra's father Ptolemy XII Auletes died in 51 BCE. Ptolemy XII was a member of the Ptolemaic dynasty, which was a Greek origin and ruled Egypt following the death of Alexander the Great in 323 BCE. But the Ptolemies were the last dynasty to rule Egypt as pharaonic kingdoms before the Roman conquest. Ptolemy XII died in 51 BCE as long as his death was triggered to a power struggle among his children, including Cleopatra. The Ptolemaic succession often leading to conflicts and rivalries among siblings vying for control over Egypt. After all, his death, Cleopatra initially shared power with her younger brother, Ptolemy XIII, but their relationship deteriorated, leading to political instability and eventually the Alexandrian War. In her father, as well as the rest of her family bloodline being so brutal, so many of her family members from her great-great-great-great-grandparents and aunts and uncles had no issue executing one another for power. It's what led her to feeling that, removing her own siblings for her desire for power isn't that big of a deal. Number 6. Her sister's death. Cleopatra had several sisters who all died at the hand of Cleopatra herself, and she could not stand the possibility of living against her reign, or them living against her reign. Bernice IV was the younger sister of Cleopatra, and after her death of her father, as we know, Ptolemy XII Auletes, Bernice briefly became the ruler of Egypt actually. However, her reign was short-lived, and Cleopatra was able to get the support of Julius Caesar, being able to return to power, leading to the demise of Bernice. Arsinoe IV was also another sister of Cleopatra, and after the Alexandrian War was the defeat of her brother, Cleopatra's younger brother. Arsinoe was taken to Rome by Julius Caesar as part of his triumph, and later the assassination assassination of Caesar, Arsinoe was pardoned by Caesar's grandnephew and adopted son. Octavian, later Augustus, however, she became involved in a plot against Cleopatra and she was executed. Their family dynasty often saw internal conflicts over succession and control of the throne, leading to complex alliances and betrayals among siblings. The fate of the Bernice IV and Arsinoe IV illustrated the high stakes and political tensions within the Ptolemaic family during the turbulent period of the Egyptian history. I can't say words, I'm so sorry, please. Anyways, number 5, I want Julius. Not me, but her. Julius Caesar was engaged in a civil war with another Roman leader, Pompey. Pompey had been defeated in a battle and fled to Egypt. Caesar was pursuing him, but then Pompey was assassinated upon his arrival in Egypt before Caesar even arrived in Egypt. Caesar was left with idle time, and so Cleopatra arranged to meet Caesar under intimate terms by having herself rolled up in a carpet that is delivered to Caesar's home quarters. When the carpet was unrolled, a vivacious 21-year-old Egyptian queen emerges, and Caesar was about 52 at the time. Nasty. Cleopatra captivated him, but it was probably not in her youth her beauty. But Caesar in general could have had beautiful young women and had the audacity to admit to Cleopatra's ploy as to amuse him, and it was a brilliant strategy. Had Cleopatra met Caesar through official state channels protocols, would have interviewed her working her charms on him, and she was said to have thousands of ways of flattering. A unimportant factor in Cleopatra's attraction for Caesar was that she was bankin' rich, especially the fact that she was technically, if anything, the richest woman in the world, or at least she would be once back in the power in Egypt. Caesar was chronically and often disastrously in debt, because they always are. Number 4, her husband's brother's death. Ptolemy, I love that name, the 13th and Cleopatra were siblings and members of their dynasty, and the ruling family of Egypt descended from the Ptolemy as one of the generals of Alexander the Great. Their relationship was marked by political intrigue, power struggles, and conflicts within the context of the complex and often tumultuous politics of the Ptolemaic kingdom. Following the death of her father, Ptolemy the 12th, Ptolemy the 13th and Cleopatra initially ruled Egypt together as joint monarchs. However, the relationship became strained, leading to a power struggle for control over the kingdom. The reason why Cleopatra was kicked out of Alexandria was because of her brother, and that summer she rallied a band of mercenaries at a desert camp under the glassy heat of the Syrian sun. She was 21, an orphan and in exile. She had already known both excessively good fortune and its flamboyant consort calamity. Accustomed to the great luxury of the days, she held court 200 miles. She held a court 200 miles from the ebony doors and onyx floors of her home, and her tent amid the scrub of the desert was the closest she had come in a year. Over those months she had scrambled for her life, fleeing from and through Middle Egypt, Palestine, and southern Syria. She had spent a dusty summer raising an army, and at that point, Cleopatra had become Caesar's mistress, and Caesar used his army to defeat and destroy Cleopatra's rival for power in Egypt, her brother husband. Ptolemy XIII then dies of drowning in the Nile while trying to escape the battle. Number 3, another brother's death. After Ptolemy XIII's death, Cleopatra had a son with Julius Caesar. Caesarion became a very potential heir to the Egyptian throne. However, the political dynamics and conflicts with Rome would later impact Caesarion's fate. She needed help overthrowing another brother, her youngest brother, just to ensure the lineage of her bloodline to rule. At the time of being Caesar's mistress, she does give birth to their son, a boy who's also named Ptolemy Caesar and also called Caesarion. Her brother, Ptolemy XIV, died of poisoning, undoubtedly under Cleopatra's orders, as she wanted her son, Caesarion, co-regent with her as Ptolemy XV. Number 2, I want Mark Antony. After Caesar had died, Cleopatra had already had her eyes on her backup man. Cleopatra and Mark Antony first met in 41 BCE when Antony was visiting Alexandria. Cleopatra was aware of the political importance of establishing alliances with powerful Roman leaders, sought to win Antony's support. Their relationship quickly developed into a romantic and steamy political alliance. Cleopatra actively supported Mark Antony's military campaigns, including his efforts against the Parthian Empire, and Antony's military and political ties with Cleopatra contributed to tensions with Rome and Octavian. In 34 BCE, Antony and Cleopatra organized a grand ceremony known as the Donations of Alexandria. During the event, Cleopatra and Antony declared their children as rulers of various territories, which included parts of the Roman Republic, which, as you know, the Republican people did not like. This further fueled the political tension between Antony and Octavian, which leads to our number 1. Number 1, Civil War. Cleopatra had multiple war echoed into her life, from her husband's brother expulsion from Alexandria, to which she had Julius Caesar as well as her own army, triggering the Alexandria War and allowing her back into the state, and the battle that led to her demise, the Battle of Actium. The Battle of Actium was a decisive naval engagement between the forces of Cleopatra and Mark Antony against those of Octavian, later known as Augustus, Caesar's adopted son. The conflict was a result of the political tensions and rivalries among the Roman leaders, and the naval battle took place in 31 BCE near Actium in Greece. Cleopatra and Antony faced a significant defeat, leading to their eventual downfall. Following the defeat of Actium, Antony and Cleopatra retreated to Alexandria, facing capture by Octavian's forces, and Antony died by taking his own life. Cleopatra, upon learning of Antony's death, also died, traditionally believed to have been taken her own life by a bite of an asp, a venomous snake, but in reality it was most likely that she had just poisoned herself. Either way, the brutal acts that she had done, from eradicating her family ties, influencing powerful men with her own power, as power is power, her unnecessary financial wealth that she couldn't utilize properly to win against the Romans in invasions, there was also a lot that she had accomplished, but there was a lot to learn from her ruling. Despite her haters being a very influential woman, she will remain in her legacy for all time. And that's all, folks. Be sure to like and subscribe, and yes, I know some of these things weren't too brutal to some, but if your sister killed your siblings for some guy she met, I think that's also messed up. Anyways, my name is Jess, and I wish you all the best. Bye!